The Apostle John said there's been many antichrists, and they've all come out from among us. The Antichrist came out from among the believer. King Solomon is the epitome of the Antichrist. He did everything God said not to do. I've almost died literally 9 times. I've had guns at my head literally twice, and they both said they're going to blow my head off.
Hello, I'm Erika Gray, and welcome to the Hunt for the Antichrist. On today's show, I am honored to have Pastor Mark Biltz, and he is a mover and a shaker within the evangelical world. But in addition to being a mover and a shaker, given his rich history, he also provides some really fascinating insights into the scriptures from the Hebrew language. Welcome, Mark, to the show.
Well, thank you so much, Erika.
Yes, and you are, my goodness, you've got Shaddai Ministries, you're part of Christians United for Israel, and you're an author on the end times. And you've recently written a book called Decoding the Anti-Christ and the End Times, and that's what you're here on the show to talk about.
So, it's great.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself and your ministry. It's very interesting.
Well, thank you. I founded it 25 years ago with just in a house with a couple of people. And now it's grown to where we do online services, and we have about 250,000 people that watch. And when I'm speaking, we'll have up to 300 cities in 30 nations watching live. And then we will, 250,000 people will watch it over the period every month. So I just wanted to connect Jews and Christians. So what I do, a lot of my theology and my thinking on end times, I've been Christian for 50 years. Basically, I'm almost 70. I've got 20 years I was raised a Catholic, and then I got saved. And then I jumped from Catholic. I jumped into the charismatic movement, and for about 20 years. So 20 years of Catholic, 20 years charismatic, and then the last 30 years, I've been working on connecting Jews and Christians and studying the Bible from a Hebraic perspective.
Yes, I see that you concentrate on the Torah, and you have very, very interesting. So I was really looking forward to having you on the show today, because I know that you've got definitely interesting insights, and you're also labeled the blood moon pastor, because I remember several years ago with the blood moons, and you had done some work in that as well. Didn't you influence like John Hagee in his book?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes,
actually, I discovered this back in 2008, and I was giving all the information away for free for 7 years. And as the state representative for CUFI, I told John Hagee, and he goes, "That is hot. I'm going to have to write a book on that." And so he got his book out, and I had a publisher come to me and say, "Biltz, everyone is writing a book on your material. Why don't you write something?" And I said, "I never took any literature classes. I don't know anything." And he said, "Well, give me 50,000 words within the next month, and I'll take care of all the editing." So I did that and published a book that, sold well over 100,000 copies. It did very well. But then I've written another book called God's Daytimer, which is all about divine appointments and the feasts of the Lord, and then Decoding the Antichrist, and then Decoding Jeremiah. And then the latest book is the book America at War, 2024 through 2026, where I talk about what's coming over the next few years.
Oh, great. Let's go at that. So what do you see coming in the next few years?
Let me take this hat
America?
off.
Of course, I can't resist to ask what your thoughts are.
I looked up you a little bit and saw what you were into, and this is going to be exciting. I'm going to love this interview because I really like to cut out all the sensationalism and just focus on current day events. That is my forte. I love tying current day events with prophecy and tying all of this together. So I'm really looking forward to dialoguing with you back and forth and hearing what you have to say as well.
Well, my strength is the final world empire. And so I do a lot of analysis as far as the European Union being the final world empire and decisions that are taking place within the EU, which, by the way, there's been a blinder over the European Union, and the media has not covered it. And a lot of the information, a lot of the really frightening decisions that are taking place, nobody's even paying attention to. So that's where I come in, is to highlight those areas and talk more in that aspect, because we're in a multipolar order. And so I was going to ask you what's your view, and then let's compare notes as far as where, well, the U.S. is going to head in the next couple of years. And then I think we'll get into the next aspect before I open my mouth any further. Go ahead.
Oh, no, that's great. Well, first off, I believe a lot, and I believe you do the same. Our economy is about to crash like never before, and we'll be going to a digital currency very soon. But my focus is basically on the divine appointments and doing everything according to the biblical calendar, because there are patterns like crazy. And much of the church and even some famous people really have no clue about Shemitah years and Jubilee years. In my latest book, America at War, I have every Shemitah year, every Jubilee year listed clear back to creation. And it's so easy to know when a Shemitah year is. If the Hebrew year is divisible by 7, no one can say like 1989 is a Jubilee year, because it's not based on the Gregorian calendar. It's always based on Rosh Hashanah, which is in the fall. So no Gregorian year can ever be a Jubilee year. It's got to be 2 Gregorian years, because the Jubilee year and the Shemitah year, intersects 2 of our Gregorian years. So to know a Shemitah year, you just got to take the Hebrew year divided by 7. To know when the Jubilee year is, you simply see if that Shemitah year is divisible by 49. Then the next year is the Jubilee year.
So where does that take us with events right now? Like, what can we expect in the events?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that.
Okay, well, I knew that's where you were heading.
Well, where are we right now biblically? Well, the thing I like to ask people is, was Daniel, the prophet Daniel, Jewish? Obviously. Okay. Well, everyone's familiar with Daniel's 70 weeks. Well, Daniel's 70 weeks are Shemitah weeks. And we know there's 1 week left of 7 years. The whole reason they went into the captivity was because they weren't observing the Shemitah cycle. And that means in the 7th year, there was an economic reset. Okay. Well, guess what? Because Daniel wasn't on the Gregorian calendar, the Shemitah week of 7 years left has to begin the beginning of a Shemitah cycle. The tribulation cannot begin at any time, any day, any year. It has to begin the first year of a new Shemitah cycle, because it's a Shemitah week. And if we don't know the Shemitah cycle, does that make sense? First off, does that even make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay, so where are we in the Shemitah cycle? The next Shemitah cycle begins the fall of 2029, going into 2030. So first off, if the tribulation does not begin then, it can't begin until 2036, 7 years later. So I'm not one who forecasts dates, but we're supposed to know the times and seasons. Okay, so if you,
it's an interesting. It's an interesting concept. It's but definitely that's an interesting observation out of the scripture, but it's a wait and see.
But it is in the scripture. That's just it. It's the 70th week of Daniel. And so he never kept anything but Shemitah weeks. And that's why they went into Babylon. So I'm just saying, as Christians, we're supposed to know the times and seasons. But I ask Christians, what time is it? Well, I don't know. What season is it? Well, I don't know. But we're supposed to know. And so I try to help from the Jewish perspective. I'm Jewish on my father's side. My relatives died in the Holocaust. And I've been studying this for over 25 years. Okay. And I know Hebrew. I teach the ancient fonts that Moses used, David used. And when you look at the Hebrew, especially the New Testament in Hebrew, as well as the Old Testament, and I've been teaching that for 20 some years, everything all of a sudden comes full color 3D. And I rely totally on science, on math, when looking at the scriptures. And
Interesting. I know that Isaiah 53 in the Hebrew is actually more descriptive to our beliefs than in our own Bible. So I know that. I've never heard anybody who's tackled the New Testament in Hebrew. I think that's fascinating.
Well, definitely. As a matter of fact, I have the #1 Hebrew scholar in the whole world as my neighbor, who is a believer. And he and I have just come out with a Hebrew New Testament. We have the entire New Testament in Hebrew, as well as the transliteration with the phonics so people can pronounce it, and then with the corrected English, because there are many mistranslations in our English Bibles and cultural misunderstandings. And some of the mistranslations are intentional, just like our media is biased.
I'm sorry to cut you off. What insights do you get from the Hebrew versus the Greek? Like what are some things you want to share with us now about some like profound insights you found by going from the Greek to the Hebrew?
Well, there's many. One of them doesn't make any theological difference, but people want authenticity. For example, when Peter denied the Messiah and the rooster crowed 3 times, it never happened. What do I mean by that? It happened, but not like in our Western mindset. Chickens and roosters were never allowed in Jerusalem because chickens weren't acceptable as a sacrifice. And who wants to smell a stinking chicken slaughterhouse around an outside temple while people are all worshiping? The word rooster in Hebrew is giver, and it means a man or a rooster. And just like the title general or captain, there was a priest called the rooster. And every morning he would cry out 3 times for the people to begin the morning service. And so, yes, it happened. But because we don't know the culture, we think it was a rooster, but it was a priest with the title of the rooster. Now, that's just one cultural understanding. I mean, just like China, Mexico, they all have different cultures. And I wouldn't go to Mexico to learn about China. So why do we study Greek to learn about Hebrew? And so we go to the source and the cultural aspects of it and then bring it out. Now, you probably know the Greek word for church, okay? Ecclesia or ecclesia, right? But it never meant church, ever. As a matter of fact, in the Septuagint, which is written 200 years before Jesus came, the word ecclesia appears all the time in the Greek. And there were no churches. And this is why in the King James in Acts 7 that talks about Moses was in the church in the wilderness. I don't think so. Okay. In Acts 19, where they're all worshiping the great goddess Diana for 2 hours, it says, and then they dismissed the assembly. Well, guess what? The word is ecclesia. Oops, we can't put church there. They'll think the church was worshiping Diana. So let's put what it really is, assembly. And so they will pick and choose, like in the book of James, who's really Jacob. It says, if one comes into your assembly with a gold ring and rich apparel, guess what? The word is synagogue. Oh my goodness, we can't put synagogue. They'll think they were meeting in a synagogue. So we're going to put assembly. But then in Revelation, when it talks about the synagogue of Satan, it's synagogue. Ooh, let's keep synagogue of Satan there. Let's not put assembly like we did over there in James. And so there are intentional, many mistranslations because the translators were biased as well.
And you list that in one of your books, right?
Yeah, I do. I do. And then our
And,
whole in
and
our new
which book is
Bible,
that? Oh, pitch your book. Go ahead, pitch your book. And okay.
Decoding the Antichrist. And so I think it is so important that people get correct translations. Even the woman at the well who had 5 husbands, and the one she was with wasn't her husband, actually was one of the most holy, righteous women in the entire New Testament. And the church doesn't understand because they don't know the culture.
Well, wait a minute. But that verse, that actually talks about the man you're with is not your husband. So give us the take on that.
Sure. The whole story is about rejection. They're meeting in Shechem, where Joseph is buried, who's totally rejected. Okay. And Yeshua comes to a non-Jewish woman and asks for a drink of water. He doesn't even have a cup. This woman is shocked. What? You're willing to drink out of my cup? I'm unclean. Yeshua is breaking down all the rejection barriers. And we know Yeshua in Isaiah 53 was a man totally rejected. Okay, this woman knew the Messiah was coming. Okay, she worshiped God. It may have been on the wrong mountain, but who doesn't have their doctrine screwed up somewhere? Okay, and she had credibility. All the Samaritans believed in her. So here is a very credible, God-fearing woman. Now, do women in the Middle East have any rights? No. How about 2,000 years ago? No, women didn't have any rights. Could they get a divorce? Absolutely not. So the fact that she's had 5 husbands, it's one thing to be a single and prostitute. It's another thing to be married committing adultery. She would have been stoned by now. The fact that she has 5 husbands means she's been dumped 5 times. She's been rejected by 5 men. Now, the one she's with that isn't her husband is because, according to the Levirate marriage, if a woman's husband dies, the brother has to marry her. Okay?
Yes.
Because women had no rights, had no jobs. If they didn't have a brother, sister, uncle, someone to take them in, they were on the streets. And so what the Lord is saying, and the guy you're with who loves you enough to protect you doesn't even want to marry you. And so it had nothing to do with fornication or adultery, nothing. 5 guys have dumped her. The one she's with isn't her husband, but he's there to protect her. Now, why is she there at noon in the heat of the day instead of early in the morning with all of the women in the cool of the day and fellowshipping? All the women reject her. Okay, so what does this come down to? She's barren. She can't get pregnant. That's why the men are dumping her. It's all about the land. And so here she's been rejected by 5 men. She feels rejected by the Jews. She's rejected by the women, just like Hannah was rejected, just like Sarah was rejected. She doesn't want all them hearing God doesn't love you. You can't get pregnant. And so she's there in the heat of the day. And when Shua says, I'll give you living water, she goes, give me that. I don't ever want to come back to this stinking place again, because every time I do, I'm reminded how rejected I am. And so then what happens? She goes, the disciples come, Yeshua points to the fields and says they're white unto harvest. Samaritans all wear white. He was talking about the Samaritans who are about to be brought in the kingdom. And this poor rejected woman becomes the first person to take the gospel to the nations. And she's a non-Jewish woman, gets the credit for all of history to be the first one to take the gospel to the nations.
Wow. You could actually write a short book on that. That is what you described. I mean, what a story. Just from that one piece and just from your insights. But let's cut to the chase now and get right to the Antichrist.
I'm ready.
Okay. You've got, I noticed in your book, it's about AI. Give us some insights. What insights do you glean?
Yeah, when I wrote the book back then, China had this social, economic, monetary system where if they didn't like your Facebook post, if they didn't like your social media post, you were debanked. Just like right now, you are seeing people debanked based on their social media. And that is exactly what China has been doing for years. You can't get on a train. You can't get on a plane. And they are using artificial intelligence with their TV cameras. It's everywhere. And I believe we are coming to a time of a global government. And within that global government, they're going to want to control and manipulate
Okay,
people
I'm
and
going to cut you right
everything.
now. I'm going to cut you
Yeah.
right now. We are in, geopolitically, we're in what's called a multipolar order.
Yep.
The book of Daniel basically talks about an empire age. We're coming into that empire age, not global government, empires. Daniel talks about an empire. The
Sure.
European Union, right now, this revived Roman Empire, has taken a geostrategic, it's going in a different direction than
Sure.
previously through global institutions. You're talking about the time during global institutions, one world government. That is not where the world is. The world's in multipolar order. That's what
Exactly.
lines with scripture. Daniel chapter 11 talks about the king of the north, also the king of the south. We have the
Right.
African Union. We're seeing India. The United States, we know, is going to decline. But Europe, this empire, right now has treaty changes that are going to come down the pike with probably within the next 5 years. They're going to they're making major decisions. They're already a global hub for trade. They are not, which is in line with Revelation 18, the
Well, that's what
Jeremiah.
I'm talking about, a global
Okay, so
hub.
when you say
That's
a
my idea,
global
a global
government,
hub.
but it's not a global government. It's not in the sense of what has been taught in the evangelical community,
Oh, I
which
totally
is
agree with that. I
this is an
totally agree.
empire that is
Right.
making, and you're going to see in the next few years,
Yes.
because it's not been reported in the media, everybody's reported that this thing's going to fall apart. They already have written digital rules that we have to follow. They've written the
Exactly.
AI Act. So I guess what I'm saying is, so now in light of a multipolar order of empires, tell me how, basically, Europe, Emmanuel Macron, he was speaking in the Netherlands, and most journalists didn't pick this up, but he stated that in future trade agreements, they would have what's called reciprocity, where nations would have to adopt their laws. This global thing is not friendly. It's not like all the nations are going
Exactly.
to be in
Right.
agreement. This empire is becoming so strong right now. They've taken the lead over the United States. They've got a battery directive.
Yeah.
They've got the AI Act. They've got the Digital Services Act. They're finding US tech companies. Already, this empire is beginning to get very powerful, punching up to its weight. And it's not in our interest. We're not even happy about some of these things. So my question is, go back to this global government, because I think the impression I get is that the nations are all maybe going to go along with this, maybe in the sense of, economic prosperity, but I don't see it. I see this one empire that Daniel forecasts that's exceedingly dreadful and terrible and
Right.
strong.
Right.
And the nations are going to need to get along with this empire. And I
Right.
think that's more of, I don't know, give me your take.
Well, I'm more than happy to use the word empire instead of global, but I think that empire will try to have global control. But here's
Yes,
the thing that's
absolutely.
happening, and
Absolutely.
that's what I'm referring to. Now, many people don't know the difference between 1 million, 1 billion, and 1 trillion rather than a few zeros. So, to make this simple, 1 million seconds is only 12 days. A billion seconds is 33 years, and a trillion seconds is 33,000 years. 1 trillion seconds is 33,000 years, and we are $34 trillion in debt, going another $1 trillion every quarter. And the world is $100 trillion in debt. It's all funny money. It's all going to be collapsing very rapidly. And we're going to go to a digital currency because this empirical global entity wants to control everyone digitally. And talk about having no value to your dollar. It's just dots and zeros and can vanish in a second. And that's how they're going to want to control. Because if you are not following, there will be reciprocity where you can't fill your gas tank. And so it's going to, because you're using an ATM card or your facial ID. So I see war coming big time because there is a big fight, polarization between different entities who want to be on top. It's always a battle to be on top. Is it going to be the East? Is it going to be the West? Is it going to be China or the United States or Russia or Europe? Okay, everyone wants to be the big dog in AI technology because they are the ones that are going to rule the rules.
Well, the other thing with AI is with all of the talk, again, in evangelical circles about the digital currency, they can know your every move without you even spending $1 on a digital currency because of our smartphones. AI is in our
Exactly.
smartphones.
Exactly.
I mean, how many times do you talk to people on Facebook and something that you talk to somebody else about shows up as an ad? And there's these horror
Right.
stories people have of their smartphones. They're talking maybe to their wife, and the wife is talking about wanting to purchase something. And the next thing it
Then
shows
that
up on
pops
the
up.
husband's phone. And
Yes.
so they're
Yes.
already, Mark, have the access.
Oh,
And this whole
totally.
through AI and through the intelligence without they're going to know if you
Exactly.
in other words, I don't think it even needs to get to a digital currency for them to have that kind of control.
Well, they can't stop you purchasing gas except through a digital currency. Otherwise, you could do cash. But my phone, I can tell you right now, I get up in the morning, I start my car, I turn my iPhone on, and it already anticipates how many miles it is to where my office is. And it tells me you're going to the office. Here's long. I mean, it knows every place I go, and it brings up a map of where it thinks I'm headed next. But
Yeah,
they can, yeah, they
it's
can totally
really
track you now.
yes, absolutely. But I see what you're saying. You do make a really good point as far as the digital currency, because they can stop you from buying and selling. And that was key, I think, in what you said about a currency, digital.
Exactly.
In other words, they can stop you because the scripture
Yes,
does say, will not be able to buy and sell
exactly.
unless you toe the line. And it's really getting scary. I want to tell you something that's in the European Union Prospective Treaty. The EU is a series of treaties, but they basically, the European federalists, and again, not talked about in the US media, but many leading politicians are federalists. They have in the next treaty to overtake the current treaty to make them a more federal union like the United States, a more of this powerful empire where they're going to put in treaty that the defense union, the army that we know the Antichrist is going to have. But one of the frightening things in that treaty is political thought enshrined in the treaty. In other words, you would have to go along with their political thought, their version of democracy. And their version of democracy totally is against conservative thinking, conservative traditional
Sure.
values. But that whole thing of even your political thought enshrined in a treaty, and then you add AI to this mess, and that's how they can find what your political thought is. So it's very, very frightening that this empire that is evolving on the other side of the Atlantic is totally falling in line with the prophetic forecast, but is becoming very, very scary with the thought of AI. And I know that Twitter, not Twitter, but YouTube was shutting down channels, and already there's censorship.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that's the whole point. That's what this AI and the social credit score. You have to have a credit to buy a house. Well, now they're going to give everyone based on their YouTube videos, like you or like me. We will get a social credit score, and we could be denied, debanked, taken over get rid of our YouTube channel or whatever. But one of the things
You
since
have
you
a
love
good
talking,
point. You're right. China has that. And then the of the Western, quote, Western nations say, China's authoritarian and we're not going to do that. Well, just look at what the European Union is about to stick into its
yeah,
treaty. And they're going to do it, but they're going to do it in another way. And what they do is they're saying, you're violating the rule of law. And so you now need to be penalized. That's how it's translating over there and how it's going
right.
to be done.
Well, one thing that much of the church does not understand, King Solomon, I don't try to come out and say who the Antichrist is, but I do believe, which is what my book is about, the character traits of the Antichrist. The Apostle John said there's been many Antichrists, and they've all come out from among us. The Antichrist came out from among the believers. The wheat and the tares grow together. King Solomon is the epitome of the Antichrist. King Solomon is a type of the Antichrist. And I prove that in my
That's
book,
interesting.
Decoding.
Okay, that's actually, I know, and you're going to have to get Mark's book for more on that, but I find that interesting. And I did mention in a show yesterday that Solomon took in the 660 shekels of gold. So
666,
we want people to read,
666.
we want people to read your book. So I don't want you to give away too much so they won't, we want them to go get your book. But if you can just share a little bit of why Solomon, who
Absolutely. He did everything God said not to do. God said he was not to multiply wives. He multiplied wives. He was not to marry foreign wives. He married foreign wives. The king was not to multiply silver and gold. He multiplied silver and gold. And he was not to multiply horses. He multiplied horses. God said, don't go back to Egypt. He goes back to Egypt, and he was an arms merchant to the enemy. It says that he would go to Egypt. Chariots and horses were the modern day tank. And it says he would get them and sell them to the Hittites and to the Syrians. He was the first king to start child sacrifice. He married all these foreign wives, and it says he built altars for every one of them and did sacrifice, and he married an Ammonite and a Moabite who worshiped Molech. And so he is the one who initiated child sacrifice. I could go on and on. He thumbed his nose at God, who appeared to him twice, telling him to quit it. And Solomon, he didn't build the temple. David gave him by the Spirit all the blueprints, all the plans, brought in the silver, brought in the gold. He hired hundreds of thousands of laborers to do all the work. And the narcissist that he is, 7 times during his dedicatory prayer of the temple, he says, this house which I have built, which I have built, which I have built, on and on, never giving credit to the hundreds of thousands of people that actually built it. And David is the one who wanted the temple, that told him to do it. He didn't want a temple. He built it, took all the credit, gave no credit to others. And then he's the one who ended up defiling it. And it was 500 years later when King Josiah had to tear down the altars of Molech that Solomon had built, it says. But I could go on and on.
Wow. What insights. What tremendous insights. So in your book, you relate to how he's a prototype.
Yes.
And we see the different prototypes of the Antichrist in Scripture.
Right, but see, he appears like a believer, like John said. He comes across, but it's all for his glory, not God's glory, and that's the
Yes.
difference.
And he's
And this is
worshiping on all the
why.
altars. That I remember reading. He's
And then in
worshiping on all the different
Ecclesiastes,
Baal.
when he's about to die after doing the temple building, it supposedly and all this, he goes, "I hated life." And why does he hate life? He says, because I got to give everything I own to somebody else. And who knows if he'll be as smart as me. That's what it says in Ecclesiastes. I mean, talk about a narcissist. He had all the wealth, okay? He had all the power. He had everything, all the women he wanted, and all this. And he hates life because he has to give it away. And that was the parable in the Gospels about the rich king who had all these barns. And I'm going to tear them down and build a bigger one. And he said, you fool. and it says there's nothing better to do than eat, drink, and be merry in the gospel. That comes from Solomon's writing in Ecclesiastes. He's the one who said that. That whole thing was a slap at Solomon.
Interesting. Wow. I'm sure your book on Jeremiah is full of this kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
information as well
Exactly, because
on the
the
prophet
book of
Jeremiah.
the book of Jeremiah, a lot of revelation is quoting Jeremiah. And the book of Jeremiah is like
Really?
all the chapters. Oh, yeah, all the chapters are thrown up in the air. And so I sort the chapters out so you read it in chronological order.
Mm-hmm.
It might be chapter 1, chapter 30, chapter 10, chapter 45. You have to put it in chronological order, and then everything, oh, wow, it's powerful. But Revelation is full of prophecies and from Jeremiah.
From Jeremiah. Now I knew
Oh,
about
yeah.
the Babylon. I knew about the Babylonian, of course, and a few others. If you want to share one, again, not giving too much away on your book because we want people to read your book.
Yeah, well, the other one, the Decoding the Prophet Jeremiah, there's so many amazing timelines. I'll give you one, besides the prophecies that are all through there, like you mentioned, Jeremiah 50, 51, a lot of the others. But do you remember when the 3 children were thrown in the fiery furnace in Babylon? Okay, in Jeremiah or Daniel.
That was Daniel.
Yes, but that's during the time of Jeremiah. I intersect the dating in the book.
Okay.
And so and I tied Jeremiah into it, so you can see in Jeremiah it says they're over in Babylon and this kind of things that's going on. There was a king in Jeremiah's day, if you remember, his scribe penned some writings and brought it into the king, talking about disaster coming if they don't repent. And it says he looked at it and he tore it up into 3 or 4 sections and threw it in the fire. It was at that same time in Babylon, they threw the 3 children into the fire and the 4th man appeared. Here, it's just the same time he's throwing the word of the Lord into the fire in Jerusalem that the word of the Lord appears in the fire in Babylon.
Interesting. Wow. So you're making me want to go out and get your book, Mark. And I love the prophet Jeremiah. So I would.
Oh my goodness,
I'm going to appreciate your insights. I do have a question for you because of your Jewish ancestry, your father being Jewish, so you identify as Jewish, and your research is I discovered that the book of Revelation is actually a Jewish book.
Of course it is.
So I'd like you to give us some insights on that, it's actually in the library, in the Jewish library, and it's considered a Jewish book. And I was blown away when I discovered that this is a Jewish book. So if you can give us some insights on that, that would be just awesome.
Well, this is why people will love my website where we have the whole New Testament in Hebrew. And so, and you can even, people that don't know Hebrew can learn to read and write Hebrew.
And so you've also gone over the Revelation in Hebrew. Okay.
I have the entire New Testament in Hebrew, the whole thing, with the corrections, how it was mistranslated or misunderstood, the whole book, and Revelation especially. But here, let me just start with Matthew for a second. We know the book of Matthew was written in Hebrew. The reason we know is when you go to the Greek and translate it back into the Hebrew, there's poetry there that you don't see in the Greek. And so it's obvious that was written in Hebrew first. And then in Revelation, it's not the Alpha and Omega, it's the Aleph and the Tav. And the Aleph Tav, I don't know if you know Hebrew or not, but in Genesis 1:1, there are 7 Hebrew words.
No, I don't know Hebrew, Mark, but from here on out, you're going to be my go-to for the Hebrew. You'll be my go-to. So go ahead.
Okay, there are 7 candlesticks in a menorah. Okay, in the temple, there were 7 candlesticks. There's 3 and 3 and 1 in the middle. Well, there are, in Genesis 1:1, there are 7 Hebrew words, and the one in the middle is Aleph Tav that isn't translated into English. So we don't see that. And when John In Revelation, he sees the 7 golden candlestick, and the middle is the one called the Aleph Tav. He is quoting from Genesis 1:1. And but there's a lot of insight that isn't seen in English, that is only seen in Hebrew. As a matter of fact, in the very first word of Genesis, Bereshit, the entire prophecy of Messiah coming is in that one word. And I can break the very first word of the Bible in Isaiah. God declared the end from the beginning. Well, guess what? The very first word means in the beginning, and I can show you the entire end in that one Hebrew word prophetically. It's unbelievable. And there's over 600 references to the Old Testament in Revelation that people don't know. And I have a whole list of a whole bunch of them.
I'm blown away. You're like blowing me away, Mark. You're gonna see me disappear in a few minutes as I hydroplane off of my chair because you're blowing me away so much. This is fantastic. Do you have in any of your books, do you have where you just focus on the book of Revelation in the Hebrew?
Well, not only in the Hebrew, but I have for free.
Maybe I'm giving you a book idea.
Yeah, but that'll probably be one of the next ones I do. But I have like a 12-hour series on the book of Revelation that's free to everybody. The audio, the video, the notes is on our website. We give practically everything away. And I go through it from a Hebraic perspective, the book of Revelation. And one thing that you're going to find,
when they say that it's got okay, so I know that the book of Revelation has ended up in the Jewish virtual library. Now, how did it end up there so that the secular Jews are recognizing this as a Jewish book? Could you maybe give a little more insight as to how it ended up in the Jewish encyclopedia as a Jewish book?
Because there's over 600 references to the Old Testament that Christians don't know because they don't know how to connect the dots. It's all tied into the Torah, the Tanakh. It completely comes from there. The whole book practically comes from the Old Testament. And that's why it is there. Now, one thing that's very fascinating, I think you might like this. We know in Revelation, it talks about the harlot, Babylonian, the harlot. But it's not a harlot, it's a whore. What's the difference, people say, between a harlot and a whore? A world of difference. But you only know this from the Hebrew. Okay. Prostitute or a whore only does it for the money. In Hebrew, a harlot doesn't want to get paid any money. She's doing it for religious purposes and wants you to join their pagan gods. So, is the Revelation harlot a religious harlot or a political harlot only in it for the money?
Oh, wow. That's a really great insight. And I have a question on that too. When Jesus talks about Balaam and he says to the particular church, because you have eaten things sacrificed to idols, what does that
and that's in Revelation.
What does that relate to in our society today? Like what would kind of things people would do that would fulfill that or reference what Jesus is talking about? Because you've taught my people harlotry and to fornication or harlotry, something like that, and to eat things sacrificed to idols. What does that translate to?
Okay, it also goes back to the book of Acts. And there are so many things in the New Testament that Christians don't understand because they don't know the context. They don't know the culture. And when it says in Acts 15, where let's only allow those who don't eat blood and sacrifice to idols, and a lot of Christians think that's the minimum to be saved. It has nothing to do with salvation. What that is saying, because what about murder? You know, what that was the minimum to be able to come into the synagogue. Just like we wouldn't want drug dealers in our congregation unless they stop dealing drugs. They're saying the Gentiles, sure, they can come in because Moses is read every week. They're going to learn, but they have to quit going to the pagan temples before they come here and fornicate, do harlotry, saying that they are worshiping that God, and then come here too. It was just a minimum before they could come into the synagogue. That was the whole purpose. But the big thing is Balaam wanted to destroy Israel. Now, here's one thing you don't see in English, you only see in Hebrew. God told Balaam he could go with them, and then it says he got mad because he went with them. The problem is English. Just like someone might be with somebody in a car, not knowing they robbed a bank, and then they get pulled over, and he goes, look, he picked me up later. I'm with him, but I wasn't with him. And so it's the same thing. In Revelation now, you have people. See, let me put it this way. This is kind of fun, but the book of Ruth is actually prophetic. Many people know Ruth and Orpah represented Gentiles grafted into Israel. They were Moabites. Okay, well, what happened? Naomi goes back to Israel. Ruth, her name literally means friend. Ruth befriends the Jew, goes to Israel, works to harvest, and ends up producing King David down the road. Orpah means to turn your back on, the back of your neck. Orpah just gives the Jew a kiss, and it says returns to her pagan gods. Orpah begat Goliath. And so the final battle in these last days will be within the church, the Goliath church, who is the woke church, versus the David church, who is the awakened church. And you're going to see a battle here between, do you support Israel or not?
Fascinating. That's all I can say. Fascinating insights. You really have a gift with all of this.
Gift of gab. I just enjoy studying this.
I mean, really have a gift. It's incredible insights. And so your work, wow. And I've looked over your website and I see what you're doing and how you're also, I guess your ministry is for Christians and Jews? Both.
Absolutely. Well, mostly it's Christians. And I'm trying to teach the Christians the Hebraic roots because too many pastors learn Greek. They don't know Hebrew. And that's who cares about the Greek? Let's look at the authenticity, the Hebrew. To give you a quick example, we all know the word Zion. Zion is another name for Jerusalem. Well, guess what? David wrote the word Zion 1,000 years before Jesus was even born in the heavenly language, which is Hebrew. Remember the Lord said he wanted to make us fishers of men? And he said, if I be lifted up, I'll catch all men. The Hebrew word Zion, written 1,000 years before Jesus came, the first letter in the font that David used was a fish hook. The tzadeh means to catch. The last letter is the end sound of Zion, the noon, which is a fish. So David literally drew the picture of a fish hook and a picture of a fish for the word Zion. What's the bait on the hook to catch the fish? The middle two letters is a hand and a nail, the Yud and the Vav. Zion was written with a fish hook, a hand, and a nail, and fish. The nailed hand of the Messiah would be the bait on the hook to catch the fish. But if you don't know Hebrew and you don't know it's a word, every letter is a word, every letter is a picture. So I like the word of God is compared to water. I take people scuba diving. We go down in the submarine. We don't just kick our toes in the water.
And also you're the director of Christians United for Israel in Washington State. You want to talk about a little bit of your work there?
Well, I was that for like 6 years and I dropped out a year ago. So I'm not anymore.
Oh, okay. But, you actually stated that you were.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I was, but I'm not anymore. But I'm just too busy. I was in 13 nations in 13 months right before COVID. And then, of course, things slowed down. But now I'm picking it back up again. I'm going to Israel. I'm going to Nepal. I'm going to India. I'm going to Kenya. And no, then I got a very busy life here as well. I just went to South Korea. I just got back from Alabama, and but I go all over
Wow.
having
So
fun.
yeah, so you didn't have, but I'm sure you still have some connections there and you're still
Yeah,
probably,
we kind of support them, but we support a lot of organizations.
that's incredible. Just incredible. So what we usually do too is the producers have a series of questions that we like to ask called the Divine Dozen as we wrap up the end of the show
Sure.
so that our audience can understand who Mark is and what makes Mark tick.
So
So
we're in trouble now.
you're in you're in trouble now, Mark. That's it. So the Divine Dozen. And the first question is, what book is on your bedside table?
Well, I have a couple of books really on my bedside table, and it's called the Bible. I I devour that. I devour that book. I mean, that is I live, breathe, and eat the Bible. I really do. I mean, I would say Exodus and Leviticus are the books at my
Oh,
bedside.
that's fantastic. And okay, what was the last TV streaming show you watched?
I don't have time for TV.
Could be a news show.
Well, I'm very interested in the politics of today, so it'd probably be the news. That's about all I watch. I don't watch TV, but and a lot of my stuff I get through the internet. But I'm very up on the elections, and I'm still so frustrated they haven't decided the House. I know the Republicans have won, but I wish they'd get these 5 last states done. Because I'm very involved also with politics and everything that goes on in the world politically,
That's fantastic.
militarily. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the last show you watched was basically news, a news show.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm in
But
your
I don't
same
believe
camp.
everything I hear. I don't believe everything I hear. There's so much fake news out there on both sides. You have to filter everything.
Right, right. And everybody's got a different bias. And no matter where you tune
Right.
in, anywhere in the world, you can hear the
Right.
bias, whether it's an Indian station, whether it's
Yeah.
Turkish, whether it's okay. So what 3 songs would be on your all-time playlist?
I love worship. I love worship songs. Of course,
What's your fave? Come on, what's your fave? What's your fave? I want to know what your fave is.
well, I love some of the Hebrew worship songs.
Okay.
Um, so, wow. Uh, Man, I'm just, but I can't sing. Don't tell anybody. I only sing in the shower. But I don't have the best voice in the world. But I would have to say, I just love worship songs. Agnus Dei, that's a song that would probably be one of my favorite. The Great I Am, that's one of my favorite. Some of these, I don't know if you've heard of them before. But I love praise and worship. That's all I listen to. I don't listen to any other music.
Okay. Fantastic. Is there oh, wait a minute. Where do you get your news from?
Actually, I go to pro Muslim websites. I go to Arab websites because I always believe you need to know your enemy, so to speak. Not that I call Arabs an enemy, but I'm thinking more. I do go to Islamic websites, and then I do a lot of the conservative websites, and I also, I want to hear every view. I do not believe I know it all. And I also believe I need to have my perspectives rounded because that's so important. And so I don't live in a box. And I'm open. I want to hear everyone's opinion because I know they're all biased. And I try to find the main perspective. So I go to just about, if you go to our website where it says breaking news, you're going to find all kinds of websites that we have links to because I want to know. I mean, even Israel websites, there are Israeli websites that are very, very liberal and Israeli websites that are very, very conservative. And I have both. And they oppose each other like crazy. because I don't have a predetermined thing and only looked at whatever agrees with me, because I don't believe I have it all together. And I want to make sure my opinions come out, I can give a balanced perspective.
Okay, so you like to listen to all different news mostly, but it
Yes,
sounds like you're gravitating towards the Middle East, Israel, Islam,
exactly. That's
yes,
my
and the different
concern.
viewpoints, yes. Um, so is there an author, podcast, website, social media channel you would recommend?
I don't really go to podcasts per se. Again, I'm just too busy. And some people wanted me to start one, but I don't know. I'm just too busy to do that. But I really don't have a podcast show, honestly, that I go to. I don't have time. I just don't have time. They always said there are three kinds of people. There are ones that wonder what happened, those who watch things happen, and those who make things happen. I am too busy making things happen to watch or wonder what's going on.
Okay, are you traveling with your books and speaking with your books, or are you speaking at
Yeah, well,
churches worldwide?
yes, I go all over the world. I go all over the United States. I go all over. I'm on radio stations, TV programs, and I love traveling. I'm going to the Perry Stone Conference, speaking to 5,000 people this April. But yeah, uh, anyone? Yeah.
You're busy. I can hear that. And you're high energy. I can hear you're very high energy for your age.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to change gears a little bit. What is your favorite fast food?
Oh my goodness, I'm bad. I'm really bad. It would be hamburgers. I have type 2 diabetes, and I do need to be
Hamburgers from
good.
where? Wendy's, Mickey D's? Where
Oh,
are your hamburgers from? Favorite fast food?
well,
Burger
I
King?
would say, well, I mean, those are the fast food places are okay, but there's a real nice hamburger place where I live that isn't a fast food. It's a sit down, enjoy a great burger, and it's good too. But if I had to choose, oh, I don't know, Dairy Queen, McDonald's, Burger King, I'll go anywhere in a rush as long as it's a hamburger. I
Okay.
just don't get them when I'm in South Korea.
Right, right. What are you afraid of?
Absolutely nothing. And the reason why I say that is I've almost died literally 9 times. I've had guns at my head literally twice, and they both said they're going to blow my head off. And I am still here. I was almost eaten by lions in Africa 4 years ago. I was in major car accidents, not buckled in, rolled my van 3 times over the
My
length of a football
goodness.
field and not buckled in.
You're
The
a
doctors
walking
almost
miracle.
killed me from medical malpractice. And so I realized if it's not my time, it's not going to happen. God says my days are numbered. So if it's not my time, I'm not going to worry about it. And if it is my time, there's nothing I can do about it. So for me, I don't even fear death.
Wow. That's just amazing. All of your close calls. Hey, what did you do when that gun was pointed to your head? What was your response?
Well, it happened twice. The first time I was 19 years old, raised a Catholic, got saved, and my dad was so upset. My dad put a gun at my head. He was drunk, and he said he's going to blow my head off for quitting the Catholic Church. And at that time, I started sucking air. But at that very moment, and this is always God. I know it's always God. My mom had pulled up in the driveway and honked the horn and wanted me to go out and help her. So he freaked out, put the gun back in his holster. I took off to help mom with the groceries. I never told her what happened, but I decided it was time to move. And so I moved. But the good news is I did lead my dad to the Lord before he died. And so it ends up as being good news.
Wow,
But
that's a
then
great story.
the
Great
other
story.
time, the other time was an armed robbery where I'm in the back room. It's in a strip center with the Kmart, the Chinese restaurant. And they have these big glass windows, as you know, in the front of all the windows. And they always have the cash register right up front so people can see. It was 3 p.m, and I'm in the back room on the phone with my boss. And this guy comes in with black pantyhose over his face, puts the gun on my head and says, "Get off the phone." And I go, "Goodbye, Larry." And he goes, "Are you being robbed?" And he said it real loud. And the guy said, "I said, get off the phone." "Goodbye, Larry." And I hang up. And he calls back, and the guy says, "Don't you answer that." "I'm not. Let's go up front." Now, this wasn't a wide store. This was a long, narrow store. We go all the way up to the front where the big glass windows are, 3 p.m. in a strip center. I get behind the counter, which is U-shaped, and I'm facing the burglar with the gun on me, and right next to me is the door to exit. And I get there and I get my hands up. He goes, "Get your hands down, stupid." I go, "I've never been robbed before. What do you want me to do?" And he didn't want people seeing as they walk by. He throws the money bag on the counter. I give him the money. And then he throws another money bag on the floor behind me where the floor safe was. So I kneel down. I open the floor safe. But instead of handing the money across the counter to him, I hand the money sideways by the front door because I want him to come around and get it and get the heck out of here. He walks around, he grabs it, and then he steps behind me. He puts the gun at my head, and he says, "Now we're going to the back room." Oh, boy. This does not sound good to me at all. And I'm trying to decide, is he a professional, or is he drunk, or is he on drugs? How serious is this going to be? And as we get to the back room, he goes, "Lay down, face on the floor." And I'm thinking, great, the old bullet in the back of the head trick, But this is where my mind is. And out of nowhere, a voice, it's not audible. And I knew it was God because it's not my train of thinking. It wasn't my thoughts. And I didn't find out later that it was from a verse in Proverbs that I had already read. And in Proverbs 3, this is what I heard. "You will not be afraid when sudden fear comes upon you. You will lay down and it will be sweet." That is in Proverbs 3. I had read it. That's why I believe people don't have to memorize.
I'm assuming
people don't need to memorize the scripture. You need to get it in so God can draw it out. It wasn't until later I read over that chapter again and I saw it. And I thought, oh my gosh, this was the word of God coming to me. And the guy just took off, and
that's incredible. Next question. What makes you laugh? Or who makes you laugh?
Well, I wouldn't say I used to have how do I say this? I have a weird sense of humor. I don't know if you remember, but I used to love the comic strip, The Far Side. I don't know if you remember The Far Side.
No, I don't.
Oh my gosh. I love humor. I mean, like Rodney Dangerfield. I mean, okay. Just some dumb. Okay, I mean, okay, just kind of some of that dumb humor, from a long time ago. But
okay, so old humor, like
yeah,
Three Stooges.
Yeah, I love stuff like that.
And Rodney Dangerfield. Okay, now next question.
Steve Martin, that would be another one. Steve Martin, he's really good.
Who is the celebrity politician expert you would be most nervous meeting?
Expert in what area?
Whatever. Celebrity. What about celebrity?
Okay, or a politician.
Celebrity, whatever, because you may not pay attention to celebrities. So
living or dead?
Either or.
Well, now that really opened things up. But we'll stick with. I won't go to the Bible and go to the dead ones. But I would say King David. But I would say living politician.
Expert or celebrity? Is there a celebrity?
Yeah, I'm not into celebrities and politicians. I don't trust any politicians, to be honest with you. They're all bots. Yeah, I would love to talk to you.
Okay. Next, what is your order at Starbucks? Why do
Well,
I
I'm
feel like,
diabetic.
go
I'm
ahead.
diabetic, so I always have to get something that's sugar free, and and I love frappes more than something hot. I like something cold, and so I usually get a sugar free caramel or vanilla frappuccino.
Okay. And how many Kardashians can you name?
None. I never watched it,
Okay.
unless you mean something off Star Trek or something. I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Okay. And and the final question,
Oh,
what's your version
yeah,
of how the worst way to spend a day or an evening for you?
watching TV. What a waste of time. I would say not do. I am
Okay.
I'm an energizer bunny. I have to
Mark,
be.
I can definitely hear that. My goodness. You probably run
You can
circles
tell.
around 20-year-olds. You have so much
I do.
energy. It's just coming through you in this interview, like you're beaming energy. Um, okay, well, that's actually it. I would like to thank you for being our guest today. And you
Thank
want to
you.
be sure to get Mark Biltz's books, Decoding the Anti-Christ and the End Times. He's also got the book on Jeremiah, Decoding Jeremiah. He's Shaddai Ministries. Check out his website, check out his programs. And I know you've been involved in different programs in the evangelical whole world through the years. Definitely check out his interviews. And Mark, definitely going to have you back. And
Well,
I want
thank
to thank
you.
you.
Thank you for having me on your program.
Well, that was a power-packed interview, if I've ever had a power-packed interview, full of information and Mark Biltz's dynamic energy, which just comes through when he speaks. And after that interview, I'm going to be looking at Mark's books myself to get some more information and insights into this just incredible, incredible topic. So you're going to want to stay tuned for more. Definitely hit that subscribe button, and I want you to hit it right now. And stay tuned for our future episodes where you're going to have information that's just going to blow you away. And as we continue this search for the Antichrist.